May 18, 1973. An apparently ordinary Friday in Vitória, capital of Espírito Santo, Brazil. The sun shone bright that afternoon when an 8-year-old girl stopped on the sidewalk to pet some street cats. It was an innocent gesture, pure, typical of a child who still saw beauty in the small things. She was returning from school, as she did every day. Her mother knew that ritual well. Her daughter always got distracted, chatted with classmates, played with little animals before catching the bus. But on that day, something different happened. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Her name was Araceli Cabrera Sánchez Crespo. And this is the story of one of the most brutal and unpunished crimes in Brazilian history. A story that forever changed the laws protecting children in the country, but that to this day remains without justice. A story that needs to be told, not only for the tears it provokes, but for the warning it represents. Because 50 years later, Araceli's name still echoes as a silenced scream that Brazilian society cannot forget. This is a story about innocence destroyed, power corrupting justice, and a legacy that changed a nation. Araceli was born in São Paulo on July 2, 1964. She was the daughter of Gabriel Crespo, a Spanish electrician, and Lola Sanchez, a Bolivian woman who had settled in Brazil. The family lived a simple, honest life, marked by hard work and dreams of giving their daughters a better future. Araceli was the couple's second child, a girl with dark hair, bright eyes, and a smile that lit up any room. She was the type of child who made friends with everyone, who found joy in the simplest things of everyday life. Her childhood was filled with laughter, games, and the innocent dreams that every child deserves to have. That May afternoon, Araceli left school wearing her school uniform and carrying her notebooks. The routine was always the same: walk to the bus stop, wait for transportation, return home. But while she waited, a white Ford Mustang stopped near her. Inside the car was a man who, according to witnesses, was known in the region. His name was Paulo Constantine Hilal. He wasn't alone in the intentions of that day. With him, participating in a diabolical plan, was Dante de Barros Michelini, known as Dantinho. Both came from extremely influential families in Espírito Santo. They were wealthy young men, protected by powerful surnames. The two belonged to families with deep political connections. Paulo Hilal convinced someone to call Araceli, saying that Uncle Paulinho wanted to take her home. The girl, trusting as only an 8-year-old child can be, accepted the ride. She didn't know she was entering a nightmare. She couldn't imagine that this would be the last moment she would breathe the free air of the city. That innocent decision would cost her life in a brutal and unimaginable way. She climbed into that white Mustang with the trust that children have in adults, completely unaware that she would never see her family again. Her mother was still at home, preparing dinner. 2 days of indescribable suffering. During this terrible period, Araceli was drugged with massive doses of barbiturates and LSD, substances that left her completely defenseless against what would come next. 2 days that would end her childhood, her dreams, her life. Araceli was taken to Bar Franciscano, an establishment that belonged to the Michelini family, located in a busy area of Vitória. But what happened inside that place transformed a common bar into a scene of absolute horror. According to the accusation that would be presented years later, the girl was held in private imprisonment in the basement and on the terrace of the establishment for 2 entire days. What followed surpasses the limits of human comprehension. Under the effect of drugs, Paulo and Dantinho subjected the child to extreme sexual abuse. Later forensic reports would reveal that the girl was violated so brutally that she presented lacerations caused by bite marks on her breasts, belly, and vagina. Let that sink in for a moment. An 8-year-old child tortured with bites by young men under the influence of drugs. Araceli's small body couldn't withstand such violence. She fell into a coma, but the aggressors didn't stop there. When they realized what they had done, when they understood the magnitude of their crime, they made a decision that would shock the nation. When they realized that Araceli was dead or dying, the criminals panicked. But it wasn't panic driven by remorse or guilt. It was the panic of those who know they have much to lose. It was the fear of punishment, not the weight of conscience. And then began a cold and calculated attempt to erase the traces of the crime. The girl's body was kept under refrigeration, possibly to delay decomposition while they planned what to do. Then, in an action that demonstrates absolute coldness, they poured acid and caustic soda over Araceli's small body. The objective was clear: to make identification impossible. To disfigure that innocent face to the point where nobody would recognize her. The goal was to erase not just a life, but the very identity of that child. Finally, Araceli's mortal remains were discarded like garbage in an empty lot near the Children's Hospital of Victoria. The cruel irony of this location doesn't go unnoticed. They threw the body of a murdered child near a place where children go to heal. But for Araceli, there would be no healing. There would be no salvation. Her fate was already sealed. Her small body, disfigured beyond recognition, lay abandoned while her family desperately searched every corner of the city. The monsters who had destroyed her life returned to their comfortable homes, protected by their family names and wealth. Meanwhile, at the Crespo family home, desperation was taking over. Lola Sanchez knew that something was terribly wrong. Araceli had never disappeared before. The girl was responsible, punctual, despite her young age. The hours turned into days, and each passing minute intensified the parents' agony. Gabriel Crespo traveled the entire city looking for his daughter. They filed a police report, begged for help, posted flyers throughout the streets. But Victoria in 1973 didn't have today's technological resources. There were no security cameras, no cell phones, no Amber Alerts. Just desperate parents and a city that would soon learn of an unspeakable horror. 6 days passed. 6 days of desperate searching, sleepless nights, unanswered prayers. Until on May 24th, the body was found. An unrecognizable body, so disfigured by acid that the parents themselves had difficulty confirming it was Araceli. Identification was only possible through small details, remnants of clothing, physical characteristics that the acid couldn't completely erase. When the news spread through the city, a wave of shock and indignation took over the population. Who could be capable of doing this to an innocent child? Who could have such darkness in their hearts? The city of Victoria would never be the same again. Neither would Brazil. The investigation began chaotically. We're talking about the full military dictatorship in Brazil, a period where institutions functioned according to political pressures and influences. And from the beginning, it was evident that this case would be marked not by the search for truth, but by a battle of power and influences. Witnesses began to emerge. One of them would be fundamental. Marisley Fernandez Muniz, Paulo Hilal's ex-lover. She reported horrifying details about what had happened, confirming that Araceli had been drugged with massive doses of LSD before being tortured and murdered. Her testimony was detailed, specific, and absolutely damning for the accused. but speaking out would cost her dearly. But every time a witness appeared, something strange happened. People who could clarify details of the crime began to die under suspicious circumstances or simply disappeared. Sergeant Jose Homero Diaz, who was leading the investigations and was about to conclude them, was murdered with shots in the back. Others disappeared without a trace. There were those who were intimidated, threatened, silenced. Journalist Jose Lucero, who wrote the book Araceli, My Love in 1976, stated that the case produced 14 related deaths among witnesses and people interested in solving the crime. 14 people dead because they dared to seek justice for a murdered child. The Halal and Michelini families mobilized all their influence and power. They hired 12 of the best lawyers in Vitoria. They used deep political connections with the military dictatorship to pressure investigators and magistrates. Evidence began to mysteriously disappear from the case files. Documents vanished. Witnesses changed their testimonies or simply stopped talking. Jose Lucero's book itself was censored during the military dictatorship at the request of the defendants' lawyers. The message was clear. They had enough power to control even what could or couldn't be published about the case. They could manipulate the truth itself. Justice was for sale, and they had the money to buy it. But popular pressure didn't let the case die completely. Clario Falcao, a city councilman who was elected state deputy with the promise of taking the Araceli case to its conclusion, managed to establish a parliamentary commission of inquiry at the Legislative Assembly of Espírito Santo. The conclusions of this commission were devastating. It was proven that there was deliberate omission by the local police. It was evident that the authorities were interested in keeping the real murderers away from investigations, precisely because they were figures of social and political prestige. The system was designed to protect the powerful, not to protect innocent children like Araceli. This wasn't justice. It was a cover-up. The case began to gain national repercussion. The country's main newspapers displayed on their covers Araceli's face and the shocking details of the crime. Magazines dedicated entire pages to the case. Radio and television stations gave ample space to the coverage. Brazilian society was outraged. How could these rich young men do something so monstrous and possibly go unpunished? How was it possible that powerful families had so much control over justice? The Araceli case exposed the deepest wounds of a country marked by inequality and the impunity of the powerful. It showed that in Brazil, some lives mattered more than others. That money could buy anything, even freedom after murdering a child. Finally, in 1980, 7 years after the crime, there was the first trial. Paulo Halal and Dante Michelini were convicted. Paulo was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Dantinho received 5 years. Dantinho's father, Dante de Barros Michelini, was also convicted for contributing to the crime and using his influence to hinder investigations. The population celebrated. It seemed that justice had finally been served. It seemed that Araceli's name would finally rest in peace. But it was just an illusion. The legal battle was far from over. The convicted men had no intention of accepting their punishment. They had money, power, and lawyers who knew how to manipulate the system. The convicted appealed the sentence. And here enters one of the most revolting aspects of this entire process. With their armies of lawyers and political connections, they managed to annul the first trial. They alleged irregularities in the process, questioned evidence, disqualified witnesses. And in 1991, 11 years after the first conviction and 18 years after Araceli's murder, a new trial took place. In this second trial, the 3 defendants were acquitted due to lack of evidence. That's right. Completely acquitted. declared innocent, free to return to their lives, free to walk the same streets where Araceli once played, free to breathe the air that was stolen from an innocent child. How was this possible? How did a case with so much evidence, so many witnesses, so many horrifying details end in acquittal? The answer lies in the toxic combination of power, money, and political influence. The evidence that could convict them had mysteriously disappeared or been disqualified. Witnesses had died or changed their testimonies. The process was described by experts as flawed, ineffective, and biased. The defense managed to create enough doubts for the jurors to acquit the accused. In 1993, the case was officially archived. After 2 decades of legal battles, the murderers walked free. Justice had failed. Power had won. Araceli's family was left with nothing but grief and the bitter taste of injustice. Paolo Hilal and Dante Michelini left the courthouse as free men. According to Jose Lucero, they became gentlemen above any suspicion. They were never bothered by justice again. They never paid for what they did to Araceli. The girl's family was destroyed. Gabriel Crespo, Araceli's father, died in 2004, taking with him the pain of never having seen his daughter's murderers pay for their crime. Lola Sanchez, the mother, disappeared from Vitoria in 1981 and returned to Bolivia, where she lives to this day. She never managed to overcome the brutal loss of her daughter. She couldn't bear to live in the city where her baby was tortured and killed, where her killers walked free. But Araceli's story didn't end with the case being archived. Her name and her memory gained a much larger dimension. The brutal murder of that 8-year-old girl exposed to the entire nation the vulnerability of children in the face of sexual predators. It also exposed how power and money can buy silence, manipulate justice, and guarantee impunity. Civil society began to organize. Child protection movements gained strength. Pressure for stricter laws increased. The Araceli case transformed into a national symbol of the fight against child abuse and sexual exploitation. Her death, though unpunished in the courts, gave birth to a movement that would protect countless other children. In 1998, during the first ECPAT meeting in Brazil, an international organization that fights the sexual exploitation of children and adolescents, about 80 public and private entities gathered in Bahia. It was there that the idea emerged to create a national day dedicated to combating child abuse. The date chosen was May 18th, the day Araceli disappeared. In 2000, the National Congress made it official through Federal Law No. 9970, authored by Representative Rita Camata from Espírito Santo. The National Day to Combat Abuse and Sexual Exploitation of Children and Adolescents. Araceli's name would be remembered forever, not as a victim, but as a symbol of resistance. Since then, every May 18th, the entire nation remembers Araceli. Schools promote educational activities. NGOs carry out awareness campaigns. Social networks light up with the color orange, symbol of Orange May, a movement dedicated to this cause. The objective is clear: to keep Araceli's memory alive so that no other child goes through the same horror, so that society remains vigilant, so that silence is not complicit in new crimes. The name of that 8-year-old girl who died so brutally has transformed into a banner of struggle and hope. Her death was not in vain. Through her tragedy, thousands of children have been saved. Through her name, the conversation about child protection became national priority. But have things really changed since 1973? The numbers are absolutely terrifying. According to data from Childhood Brazil, only 10% of child sexual abuse cases are officially reported. This means that if 102,000 complaints were registered in a year, in reality this number could exceed 1 million cases that remain hidden in the silence of homes and in the fear of victims. In 2023, 74,930 cases of rape against minors were recorded. It's the highest number in history. Despite all the laws, all the campaigns, all the awareness, the problem is getting worse, not better. Children continue to suffer in silence. Every hour that passes in Brazil, 3 children are sexually abused. 3 innocents have their childhood stolen, their souls marked forever. And most of these victims are girls. Most are black children. And the worst of all, most abuse happens inside their own homes, committed by people who should protect these children. Fathers, stepfathers, uncles, grandfathers, family, friends. Children who live in daily terror of looking at their aggressors during dinner, who hear threats and have their screams suffocated by a society that often chooses not to get involved. The silence continues to be the greatest ally of abusers. The fear continues to protect predators more than it protects children. But some important changes have happened since the Araceli case. The Child and Adolescent Statute, created in 1990, established comprehensive protection for children and adolescents against any form of violence, exploitation, abuse, and neglect. Law number 12,015 of 2009 redefined sexual crimes and established the concept of rape of vulnerable persons. With more severe penalties for abuse against minors under 14 years old, the Maria da Penha law also contributed to the protection of girls in situations of domestic violence. In 2020, Law number 14,069 created the National Registry of People Convicted of Rape Crime, a database to monitor sexual criminals. Educational campaigns teach children to identify abuse situations and ask for help. Reporting channels were created such as Dial 100, which operates 24 hours a day and maintains the anonymity of the reporter. These are important advances without a doubt, but the reality is that these laws and mechanisms are still insufficient given the magnitude of the problem. Laws on paper don't automatically translate into protection on the streets. Many children don't even know these resources exist. Many adults who suspect abuse choose to stay silent, afraid of getting involved, afraid of being wrong, afraid of causing problems. The system has improved, but the culture of silence remains strong. Breaking that silence is the greatest challenge. And what about the Araceli case specifically? The fight for justice never completely stopped. In 2023, when the crime turned 50 years old, the National Human Rights Movement, together with the Sarah Human Rights Defense Center and the Federation of Organizations for Social and Educational Assistance, filed a complaint with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights of the Organization of American States. The complaint argues that the Brazilian state failed to guarantee justice and allowed the crime to remain unpunished for 5 decades. It's a bold move, taking Brazil's failure to the international stage, demanding accountability not just for the murderers, but for the system that protected them. The entities demand what they call historical reparation. They demand that Brazil reopen the investigations, hold accountable the authorities who contributed to impunity, implement more effective child protection measures, and possibly compensate Araceli's family members. If the OAS accepts the complaint, Brazil can be internationally condemned for human rights violations. It would be an official recognition that justice failed, that power and money bought silence, that Araceli never received the justice she deserved. But it would also be an opportunity to finally do something right, to send a message that impunity has an expiration date, that eventually the truth will demand to be heard, even if it takes 50 years. There's also a symbolic debate happening in Vittoria. One of the city's main avenues bears the name of Dante Michelini, the patriarch of the family, an influential coffee grower who died in 1965, before the crime happened. But this same avenue leads to Bar Franciscano, where Araceli was held in private imprisonment and tortured. And at the end of this avenue, there is now an Araceli memorial. The irony is painful. A street named after the family of one of the murderers leads directly to the place where the crime happened and ends at a memorial for the victim. Several projects have been presented in the city council to change the avenue's name, but all have been rejected. The debate continues. The family still has power. It's worth reflecting on what would happen if the Araceli case occurred today. With current forensic technology, security cameras everywhere, ultra-precise DNA analyses, cell phone tracking, and digital surveillance, it would be much harder to hide evidence. Social networks would amplify the case instantly. Public pressure would be immense and immediate. The whole world would know Araceli's name within hours. But at the same time, we live in an era where misinformation spreads as fast as truth, where conspiracy theories can confuse investigations, and where power and money still buy influence, just using more sophisticated methods. Would justice be served today? Or would powerful families just use different tactics to achieve the same result? Araceli's legacy forces us to ask difficult questions. How many other children are suffering in silence at this exact moment? How many predators remain free because they have money and connections? How many cases are suppressed before they even reach the courts? And most importantly, what is each of us doing to change this reality? Because the protection of children is not just the responsibility of the state or the police. It's the responsibility of the entire society. It's the responsibility of every adult who witnesses or suspects abuse and decides what to do with that information. Silence is not neutrality. Silence is complicity. Every time we choose not to see, not to hear, not to report, we become part of the problem. If you see something strange, if you notice changes in a child's behavior, if you hear worrying reports, you have the power to save a life. Hotlines are available 24 hours a day. The complaint is anonymous. You don't need to have absolute certainty, just well-founded suspicions. It's better to make a complaint that proves unfounded than to remain silent while a child suffers. Many people are afraid to get involved, to cause problems, to be wrong. But think of little Araceli. Think of the terror she lived during those 2 days of captivity. Think of her last moments, alone, in pain, betrayed by the adults who should have protected her. If someone had spoken up, if someone had reported suspicious behavior, she might still be alive today. The Araceli case reminds us that impunity is not just about letting criminals go free. It's about the message that sends to society. When powerful people commit heinous crimes and escape without punishment, it teaches everyone that there are different weights and different measures, that justice is not blind. It sees very well who has money and influence, that some lives are worth more than others, that a poor child, daughter of immigrants, doesn't have the same value as the children of the elite. This is the most poisonous lesson a country can teach its citizens. It breeds cynicism, destroys trust in institutions, and tells predators that if they have enough money, they can get away with anything. But there is also hope. Every educational campaign, every complaint made, every child saved from an abuse situation represents a victory. Every time we talk about Araceli, we keep alive not only her memory, but also vigilance against these crimes. Every professional trained to identify signs of abuse, every attentive teacher, every courageous neighbor who makes a report is building a stronger protection network. Change happens person by person, decision by decision, action by action. And it starts with the refusal to accept the unacceptable. It starts with each of us deciding that we will not look away, that we will not be silent, that we will not allow another child to suffer what Araceli suffered. Araceli Cabrera Sánchez Crespo was only 8 years old when her life was brutally interrupted. She liked to play with kittens in the street. She probably had dreams typical of a girl her age. Maybe she wanted to be a teacher or a veterinarian or a dancer. Maybe she dreamed of traveling, discovering new places, having her own family one day. We'll never know who she would have become, what contributions she would have given to the world, what love she would have spread. All of that was stolen from her on that day, May 18th, 1973. Her potential, her future, her very existence was erased by men who saw her as nothing more than an object for their twisted desires. But her name didn't die. Her name resonates. Every May 18th, millions of Brazilians say her name, Araceli. Schools talk about her. Families discuss the importance of protecting children. Activists gather in her memory. She cannot live. The criminals ensured that. But her story lives. And as long as her story is told, as long as her name is remembered, she will continue saving other children. She will continue inspiring the fight for justice. She will continue denouncing the impunity that allowed her murderers to walk free. In death, Araceli became more powerful than her killers ever imagined. They destroyed her body, but they couldn't destroy her impact. They silenced her voice, but they created an echo that will never fade. 51 years have passed since that terrible day. More than half a century. Paulo Halal and Dante Michelini never paid for what they did. They never spent a day in prison for torturing and murdering an 8-year-old child. They lived their lives normally, protected by their surnames and connections. Meanwhile, Araceli's parents carried the pain of loss until their final days. The mother lives to this day in exile, unable to bear the city where it all happened. The family was destroyed. Justice failed. But memory remains. The truth remains. And somewhere, in the collective conscience of Brazil, there is a debt that can never be repaid, a child's life that can never be restored, an injustice that can never be undone. If there is any lesson we should take from this terrible story, it is that silence kills, fear kills, omission kills. But the courage to speak, to report, to not accept injustice, can save lives. So if you saw, if you know, if you suspect any situation of abuse or sexual exploitation of children, don't stay silent. Don't be complicit. Make the call. File the report. You can be the difference between life and death for a child. You can prevent another family from going through the hell that Araceli's family went through. You have that power. The question is whether you'll have the courage to use it. Whether you'll choose to be part of the solution or part of the silence that enables these crimes. Araceli had no choice. She couldn't defend herself. She was just an innocent child who trusted the wrong people, who had the bad luck of crossing paths with predators protected by privileges. But we have choices. We can decide to be the voice of those who cannot speak. We can decide to be the protection of those who are vulnerable. We can decide that impunity will no longer be tolerated. That every child, regardless of their social origin, deserves protection, dignity, and justice. This is the greatest tribute we can pay to Araceli, not just remembering her name once a year, but living every day with the commitment to protect children, to speak up when others stay silent, to act when others look away. Her name became synonymous with struggle, with resistance, with hope that one day we will have a Brazil where no child needs to go through what she went through, where justice works equally for everyone, where power and money cannot buy impunity. That Brazil doesn't exist yet. But every time we say her name, every time we refuse to forget, every time we protect a child, we are building that future. Araceli Cabrera Sánchez Crespo, 8 years old, forever 8 years old. But her legacy is eternal. May her story never be forgotten. May her name continue to echo through generations. May her death continue to save lives. That is justice, even if the courts failed to deliver it.